Okay, we're live. So we are live now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Natasha Schlinkert, COO of Zymeta Provider Solutions. And I have a master's degree in healthcare administration with a focus in finance and health informatics. I've been in the healthcare industry for approximately 20 years, and I'm so excited to be at the groundbreaking level of robotic process automation in the healthcare industry. And I'll turn it over to Sudhir.
Hi everyone, this is Sudhir. I'm the CTO of Cog9 Technologies. I've over 15 years of experience in application development, RPA, Robotic Process Automation, data analytics, and machine learning. I'm happy to be part of this conference today and, share my experiences. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Sudhir. Okay, so today we're going to talk about first, why now? So what are the driving factors that made us decide that now is a great time to really start automating with robotic process automation? And then the benefits, why we automate with RPA and some of the benefits that we have experienced. And then successfully automated processes. So we want to talk about a couple of the specific processes that we've automated and the successes and challenges that we found. And then we'll go into some of the behind the scenes, more technology and strategy that have been experienced through Sudhir's side, and then how we optimize in the future of healthcare automation. So why now? First, there are many legislative pushes, particularly in the US, for a regulatory shift to value-based care from a fee-for-service model. So typically, historically, it's been more of a perform a service and you'll get paid for each service individually at a flat rate. And now we're shifting to more of a holistic patient care view. And because of all of these regulations and the shift in regulatory pushes, there are a lot more physicians and practices are taking more financial risk than ever. So in order for our physicians and hospitals to remain at the forefront of being able to maintain a profit margin and keep their doors open, it has really come to our attention that we need to maximize, optimize, and streamline a lot of our processes. And it's an alternative to outsourcing administrative functions offshore, which has been a more well adopted function over the past several years, and it's not as accepted. And so in order for us to keep some of those functions in-house, it has really helped by using robotic process automation. And then the mindset has shifted quite a bit. So historically, physicians and healthcare administrators have really felt that the administrative functions, the denials, the diagnoses, and how we treat the administrative functions in healthcare is as unique to each individual patient and visit as the patient care itself. And then there's been a great advancement in reporting and analytics that really give us the data that we need to be able to identify those processes that will really be successful or will give us the highest ROI in the robotic process automation. And then as we've all experienced, COVID-19 pandemic has forced everyone to adopt more technology, such as in healthcare, telemedicine, and the companies that never really thought of sending people to work remote have kind of been forced to do that. And so people have really adopted a lot more technology in recent year, I guess I should say. Some of the benefits that we have personally experienced with RPA automation is that first, the human error rate is 4%. So since bots can only do exactly what they've been programmed to do, we are more easily able to identify those things that are not working accurately. We know that if we trace that process back, we'll be able to quickly identify what did we tell the bot to do that we don't truly want it to do, as opposed to if we give an instruction to our staff and they're not following those, then it's a lot more challenging to identify those and correct those behaviors. And then speed. So in some of the processes, RPA can do in 6 seconds what a human can do in 10 minutes. So we can accomplish a lot more in a much shorter period of time, and it reduces those bottlenecks that we've seen with human intervention. And then the overhead. So in some of the processes, we have been able to reduce as much as 90% of the cost. As we know, in any process, there's always a small piece that will not be able to be automated. It will always have to be obviously audited for quality and all of those types of things. So, but up to 90% in some cases. So that's pretty huge. So now we're going to go through some of the processes that we've successfully automated. So we'll start with eligibility and deductible holds, onto medical records submission, and then authorizations, claim rejections, and denials. I realize that many of these things are going to be really specific to US healthcare, so bear with me. So the first process, eligibility and deductible holds. So in US healthcare, patients have an option to select from multiple private payers, and then there are government payers as well. But even with the government payers, so when a patient becomes 65, then they're eligible for Medicare, which they've been paying into throughout their careers. And so even with that Medicare, there are multiple advantage plans that they can select, and that just kind of complicates things quite a bit. When a patient changes their insurance plan, then you'll have to get a new identification number, all of those things. And if you submit the claim with the wrong information, then you'll get denials, which take a long time. It's a lot of human intervention and manual processes. And so what we've done was programmed the bots to run eligibility checks online after the patient has been seen and the charges were created, but before the claims are released to the insurance carrier to be paid. And so what that does is it helps us to identify those before we go through the entire denial process, which is another long process. And so it utilizes a total of 6 RPA hours per day and only 20 total development hours. So the cost was pretty minimal for us to implement that. And some of the benefits that we've seen from that is faster reimbursement, fewer touches per claim. So that means the human hours and workforce hours have been significantly reduced. And then our denial rate. So again, like I said, it just avoids all of those long denial processes. And then reduced bad debt write-off. So once you have denials, you only have a certain number of times to appeal it. If a human has not appealed it correctly, then it will never get paid. And so you'll have to write that off and it's lost revenue. And then we've been able to increase revenue as a result of avoiding those bad debt write-offs. The next process is the deductible hold. So patients have a deductible or a portion that they will have to pay before insurance kicks in at the beginning of each year. And so with that, we have been able to program the bots to verify the eligibility, see if there's a deductible remaining, If there is, then it will hold that claim, and then it will go back and verify it once a week until the patient's deductible has been met, and then it will release the claim. And so that avoids us having to approach patients for large sums of money, and we get paid much more quickly from the insurance carrier. It's a lot less following up, having to track down those dollars from patients. And then, of course, it reduces those bad debt adjustments for uncollectible patient balances. So the next process is our medical record submission. So sometimes when we submit claims to an insurance carrier, they'll request medical records, sometimes to validate that it was medically necessary, and that there wasn't overutilization. Sometimes they just need some additional information to identify whether we've billed it correctly before they will pay. This happens quite a bit, and so the human intervention, there is a lot of manpower hours, and it can take quite a bit of time to locate the claim, locate all of the medical records, and then print them, put them in an envelope. And so what we did was program the bots to locate, print, sort, and organize. But then we took it a step further. So this is one of those processes where we were able to utilize the RPA process, but not exactly the way that a human would do it. We were able to even further optimize by having the bots store these in folders by insurance carrier and print them in order by insurance carrier. That way, the person that's mailing these would be able to go and just grab the entire stack that goes to each particular insurance carrier at each address and just put that into an envelope. And we were able to reduce from 5 full-time employees to 1 employee at 2 hours. So that was it was 94% of the human intervention. It was really great. One of the other things is that it waits until after hours to print. So it frees up the printers during the day when the staff is there using them, and it avoids all of those medical records in large volumes getting mixed in with other print jobs that are happening. So as with anything, there are some challenges, and this is one that's kind of fairly recent, and I'm sure, Sudhir, you'll remember some of the challenges that we faced. Some of these files were larger and some were smaller, and in no particular order. So because of that, the printer was printing them out of order and mixing one patient's claim with another patient's medical record, and it was quite a hassle to sort those and get them back in the correct order. So we kind of toggled around with some of the different options. In troubleshooting, we said, okay, let's try with multiple printers so that we're printing, some on this printer and some on this printer. That didn't really help. We tried spreading the process start times, but that still didn't really help. And so the solution was to combine all of these to a single PDF and then print so that it was all downloaded on the printer at the same time, and it had no choice but to print it in the correct order. So as with anything, it was a little bit of troubleshooting and using our brain power in connection with that RPA. So the next process is our authorizations. So sometimes the insurance plan for some specific procedures that are more expensive or more invasive, they require a prior authorization in order to pay for those and ensure that we'll receive reimbursement for those services. It can be a pretty lengthy process for a person to either wait on hold, call the insurance carrier, request the authorization, and then set a tickler or reminder to check back in a day or a couple of days, depending on how long that particular insurance payer takes to process those. And so what we've done is program the bot to submit the authorization request online with the patient information and the physician information, and then go back and check the portal every 24 hours for an authorization number. Once it has identified that the authorization number has been accepted, then it will place that authorization number on the patient's account and then bill that claim right away. So we're getting the claims out much more quickly, reducing the overhead, reducing the amount of touches, and removing some of those bottlenecks. So the same is true when we receive a rejection or a denial because we failed to get an authorization. The bot can request a retro authorization, even post services. So this was very, very lucrative. And we had a 78% reduction in overhead, and the process saves an enormous amount of time and resources. So claim rejections and denials. So rejections are where we've submitted the claim and it goes to the clearinghouse or the middleman, if you will. Insurance carriers will submit to the clearinghouse a list of criteria that says filter out claims for these criteria prior to even sending it to us, and send it back to the healthcare provider if it doesn't meet this criteria. So for those rejections, often it's a simple fix. It's either a gender mismatch, a date of birth mismatch. It can be like a zip code or address mismatch. So some of those things, because they use a very specific set of rejection or denial codes, called the claim adjustment reason codes or remittance advice reason codes, those CARCs and RARCs, we will use those to say every time we receive this specific rejection or denial from the insurance carrier, then we know exactly what we need to do. So the same as we would train a human, every time you see this, do this. And so we've used that mapping to be able to program the bots, and it has really reduced about 60% automation capability for 47% cost savings, which is pretty huge because those volumes can just be enormous. We typically will start with some analytics to identify the highest volumes to decide where the highest ROI would be. And that's been really amazing as well. So while there's many processes that we've worked on and many more that I'm sure we'll encounter in the future, I'm really excited to be at the ground level of RPA in healthcare and to share my real-time experiences. So now I'll turn it over to Sudhir.
All right. Thank you, Natasha. Thanks for sharing your experience on RPA and within healthcare. So, as the next part, right, let's start talking about the technical aspects of RPA, where what happens in the background, where do we start, what are the general challenges, how do we strategically navigate through them, and just have a peek at what we think would be the future of RPA. So if we, Natasha, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So if we start about RPA, right, the process automation, robotic process automation. So the first thing is at an organization level, right? So we need to know whether the management has a buy-in into automation. And that is where certain questions would be raised, like, is there an awareness of automation among the management and the teams on what needs to be automated, what can be automated, and what cannot be automated as well, right? So that is where to understand what is process automation all about, where can it be applied within our organization, attending such conferences, meeting industry experts, having certain consultants to help the organizations in identifying these things is one of a good approach to start with. And now that the organization has had an information on what is automation, now the next immediate step would be how do we start with automation, right? So that's creating an automation roadmap in the organization. So for that, a detailed analysis of existing applications, existing processes, existing technologies and IT landscape is equally important, because that is where we'll actually try and identify how many processes are actually there in the organization which have been repetitive, where there has been a lot of human or manpower being I would say underutilized, because they've been doing the same thing iteratively again and again. Identifying that, and also at the same time having an idea on how our IT landscape or infrastructure supports this automation as well, right? Along with this one, another important aspect of getting into automation is having a proper buy-in from all the teams involved. So including the process teams, including the IT teams, because automation is not to replace people. It's just to make sure, it enhances the productivity of people. So the existing teams can focus on much more challenging work there, right? So we need to have a good buy-in there, and eventually we'll end up with some tool or platform selection. Now, once we get into tool or platform selection, the next step would be getting into the details of the processes. So that is, creating an opportunity pipeline. So as we all know, there would be a lot of processes in most of these most of the organizations, where some would be standardized, well documented, so that it can be handed off to even other team members and all. Some would be non-standardized. There will be certain processes which are completely digital, that is end-to-end digitalized. That is, you start from maybe a web application and you end up uploading a file into some other application, right? So it's completely digitalized. Some might need a lot of human intervention. There would be decision making. There would be certain things like, printing it and, pushing the printed documents into envelopes and mailing them. So there would be certain processes with human intervention. There would be certain processes which are completely digital end to end. Some would be standardized, some documented, some might not be standardized and all. So this is where the first step, which usually we recommend to do is, we take list down all the processes. What are all the tasks or processes which are there in the organization? How many of these are repetitive? And then what is the average time spent on each of these processes? And then what is the manpower? And, we created a report, a matrix of where we stand. After that, it becomes easier to actually identify what is the first few processes to be automated, because that is where we can actually quickly see the return on investment, right? So that's where we pick up a process, get to the corresponding team, conduct a workshop or an interview or a questionnaire, and eventually create a process requirements document, right? The automation document, which is either it can be a simple Word document, an Excel, or even in fact a video recording. So with that in place, the next important thing to be identified is the value stream mapping. That is, what percentage of the selected processes where we are about to start automation can be automated fully. As Natasha was mentioning earlier, not every process can be automated 100%, right? So there might be certain process where we may reach up to 95, 98%, but there will still be certain process where we may end up with 70% automation and 30% human intervention. So that value stream mapping is extremely important when we get hold of the details of the process. Natasha, can you go to the next one? So with the first two steps in place, that is the organization buy-in, and then we also have identified the processes to be automated, at least the initial few. Then comes the actual technical implementation part, right? So most of the platforms available in the market right now actually support low code or no code RPA. So what do we mean by low code or no code, right? So nowadays, most of the platforms are encouraging the business users themselves or the teams who are involved in the process themselves to go ahead and create a process in a bot. Right. So where the expectation is you do not need to have any idea on programming. You really don't need to understand every component available. You just need to read about the ones which are needed and go ahead and do it, right? That is the no-code RPA approach. Whereas there will be certain areas where maybe we'll have to tweak because the existing components in the platform might not be exact match for what we are trying to do. And that is where we have a little bit of scripting. I wouldn't really call it coding, but there will be a little bit of scripting to be done here and there. So that is the low-code approach. So how do we actually know which platform to be used, and and also to envision or foresee the different challenges there? So one best approach is go with a POC approach, that is a proof of concept approach, right? Where we try and pick one of the most complex processes involving several different applications, and then we actually set up an environment where we try to automate that particular process. And as part of that, this entire phase, right, we actually understand the concepts of development and also the complexity of development or configuration of these bots, where whether that knowledge has to be within in-house, or can that be managed by our in-house IT team and developers, or should that be outsourced, right? And then slowly transition back to the organization. So such decisions would also be easy through the POC process. And couple of challenges generally we face when it comes to implementing any of these automation is the security aspects, the modularity and efficiency of the bot programming itself, right? So obviously there will be certain credentials to be used as part of this entire thing, because usually these credentials would be with some set of people in a team. But then if we are programming it into bot, maybe the bot will have to log in as different roles or different as different modes, right? So that is where most of these platforms also support a very good security infrastructure, where they have the orchestrator where we can actually store the passwords. There are components where we can actually encrypt the data transfer between different layers or different applications, and even decrypt at the other end, right? So these security layers can be added in place. Along with this, when we talk about certain industries where we talk about healthcare or finance, that's where there will be enough regulations in place to make sure data doesn't go out of premise, or it cannot be on cloud and such things, right? So all the current platforms actually have cloud and on-premise versions. So the most popular ones already have cloud and on-premise. So that's another decision which can be taken as part of the POC process, right? When we are trying to develop or build this part, that is when we can actually encounter all of this. Another challenge which usually people end up with is network and application constraints. So just as an example, right, if a human actually, or if a particular team member is trying to print, say, medical records, right, and then they get the claim form. So these two are in two different machines, two different virtual machines altogether, okay? So usually humans tend to, take a particular patient medical record number, go to the medical records application, download the medical record, then go to the claims application, download the claim form, and then they combine, they store it, and then move on to the next record, right? So when this is happening, because this is done by humans, and usually we tend to accept certain level of network latency, that is still acceptable when we are doing it manually. But when we are doing it through a bot, all these network latency, the application level constraints, like not allowing a bot to actually use shortcut keys, whereas a human can do, because it's a VDI versus VM, right? So there are restrictions on the way we are accessing. So all these can also be figured out as part of the POC process, and this would be a good approach to ensure a smoother development for all the remaining processes in future. So once this is done, right, another aspect which we eventually get to know as part of the POC approach is the process tweaking itself. So what we mean by process tweaking is So in the same example which I've said, where medical records are first downloaded, and then the corresponding claim forms are downloaded and stored in a folder, right? Now, when we try to automate to make it even more efficient, we can actually program the bot to actually first download all the medical records for all the patients, so that it's actually accessing only one application and the latencies are minimum there. And then we move on to the claims application and download all the corresponding claims. So that is an actual process tweak from a manual approach to a automated approach. So we can actually do all of these as part of POC, and then we collect the results and then understand the return on investment, and then actually get into the implementation part where we buy the licenses, we actually buy the corresponding infrastructure, and then we get into the installation mode. So as part of implementation, whenever we are getting into installation mode, actually there is a lot of coordination needed between the vendors, that is the platform vendors, and also the IT teams, to make sure the security aspects of your environment are not disturbed, and at the same time the bot can automate, right? So that is where a lot of coordination goes in. And post implementation, usually there will be enough maintenance involved. Now, this maintenance is not really from a bot execution standpoint or a process execution standpoint, but usually there will be two aspects to be considered. The first one is, are there any new changes in the process? Because these changes might have been triggered because of several factors, right? Maybe there is a new upgrade in the software itself, which might lead to certain changes. Earlier, whatever 70-80% of automation was done, maybe because of some digital enhancements, it can be taken up to 90%. Maybe some new APIs were introduced, and instead of printing, now we directly post it in the APIs, right? So such process changes usually will have to be programmed in back to the existing ones. And then another important thing is always having an eye on efficiency analysis and planning for decommissioning of certain processes. So what do we mean by this, right? So initially, maybe when we started the development and we moved it to production, it was all fine. The bot was running, the process was running in a bot fine. And then slowly we see that there are enough processes added to a single bot, and that is deteriorating the performance of the process itself, right? Maybe what was taking 2 hours earlier might be taking 6-7 hours now, maybe because of the changes which were added after deployment, and also maybe because of the congestion or certain other external factors, like maybe the network latency, the application performance, the machine performance itself, right? So having a good efficiency analysis even after production is extremely important, and that is where we can actually plan for decommissioning certain processes if they are not meeting the expected outcome, right?
So one of the things that I'll add to that is, when we talk about the proof of concept, when you're first starting to, and I'm not sure if there's anybody on here that is looking into starting robotic process automation and has not yet made the initial investment, but that initial investment can be quite cumbersome. And so when you're first going through that proof of concept to see if there's really an ROI or if it works out for you, I would suggest finding a company that, like Cog9 did for us, where they will do that proof of concept. They already have the servers, they already have the environment set up, and all of these technical things that that Sudhir understands, that I don't quite understand all of those pieces in the back end, but they were able to kind of create a sandbox for us where we could test out our processes. It was actually running the bots on our system with our data, but on their platform without us having that initial investment, until we could see that there truly was quite a bit of ROI. And then we were able to look at the various options that we had, the different platforms, do a side-by-side analysis, and they walked us through and helped us through that process to do it the most cost effectively.
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. So yeah, let's take a peek at what we think is the future of RPA, or I would call it, IPA going forward, which is the intelligent process automation. So the first thing, of course, is moving more towards no-code platforms. So most of the companies, the technology companies, are actually investing on a lot of no-code RPA platforms, and also trying to enhance the experience to the business users, right? Like even in the recent times, Microsoft has released a Power Automate as part of Windows operating system itself. Like right now it is with enterprise versions, but it will get into professional and all. But the idea is any user, whether whether you actually are working in an organization, or you're a student where you have some day in day out tasks to be automated. Now the idea is, without having any coding knowledge, you can automate your applications, right? Your processes. So that is where most of the investment is going on, the exploration is going on, and the research is going on at this point. And also, of course, when we talk about revenue generation, and return on investments, at this point, at least most of the IT buyers, that is the technology companies, are the ones who have invested in RPA and are enjoying the fruits of it. But I think a lot of non-IT buyers are the ones who are going to drive RPA going forward, because that is where the most challenging applications still are there, right? So that's one of the aspects. Another one is about the cognitive automation. So yeah, we all have been hearing about artificial intelligence, machine learning, the natural language processing, right? Now, this is something which is we are seeing lots and lots of these components being embedded into RPA now, and into most of the platforms, in fact, where the bots can start understanding or learning as and when there is a human intervention needed, and then they take their own decisions, or they take a decision based on the previous experience, right? So this is something which is picking up already. Most of these platforms have AI and machine learning components in it. NLP is still a third-party component at this point, but I'm sure that's going to be part of the platforms going forward. The last one, an interesting one, I would say, is the process modeling automation. So what is process modeling automation, right? So earlier we were discussing about, once a process is identified, we need to document the process, or we need to understand the steps or the flows within the process, right? So those flows, as we discussed, right, it can be in any form, like we take certain screenshots and add it into a Word document, or we record everything as a video, so that the developers or the teams involved in creating or automating these processes can actually start coding it in, right? So process modeling automation, this is a place where a lot of research is going on again, where the input can be a simple Word document or an Excel sheet, or even a video for that matter, and the IDEs, the development environments, actually create the bots for you, or they create the code for us, instead of we actually selecting the corresponding components. So it's like a record and develop kind of approach, right? So that is another interesting area which we think is picking up, and in future that will reduce a lot of developers' time, or the development cost there. So yeah, that's pretty much on the technical aspects, and and thank you for being patient and trying to understand the technical and technology aspects of this.
I'm personally really excited for the process modeling automation. I can't wait for that piece of it to come out. And I know when you were sharing this with me, one of my questions to you was, how long do you think it'll be until we're able to see that really come to fruition and start using that functionality?
Yeah, I think I think it'll be in the next 4 to 5 years, maybe, Natasha. That's what I'm seeing, because the research is pretty much in an initial phase right now. Yeah.
Yep, that's so exciting. Okay, so now we're gonna take any questions and go to the Q&A section. We would love to hear from you if you have any questions or comments, any feedback.
Yeah.
So I have a question as well, and you can comment or answer in the chat. So how many of you are actually looking forward to or have heard about or already starting to plan for the process modeling?
Natasha, I think there is one question. How long did it take to get to the status quo?
Oh, that's a really great question. So when we started with one process, it typically takes us about 6 weeks to implement a process and have it fully functioning, where we can actually start to shift our staff onto another function. So I would say probably it's like 6 weeks for each process. And now where we have so many processes, there are, I would say it's been probably, would you say 8 months? Yeah, 8 months. That's a great question. So is anybody else utilizing some of the same processes that we are utilizing, or the same implementation strategy that we've talked about today? Yep, I would agree. Thank you, Daniel. Yep, I would agree. It's one of the things, so that is next to nothing for the value provided. Yes, the value that has been provided has been absolutely enormous. And so as we look to some of the next processes, is really starting to map out several of our client reports. So we use, and I'm not sure if anybody uses Alteryx, but we use Alteryx, which basically you kind of build a process once, and it will take data from multiple different sources, match it up. It will pivot it and do a lot of filtering and formulas and all of those things, which we can all do in Excel. And when I initially started using Alteryx, it was a lot faster in Excel just because I had more experience in it. But once you build it the first time, then you just pull the data, drop it in and click run, and then you have the finished product at the end. And so now we're really starting to use robotic process automation to go and pull the data and drop it in, and then just email those finalized reports. So all of our client reporting, all of our month-end reporting has been automated as well. So really looking forward to the next one. I want to start with my team in process optimization for diagnostic products, FDA documents and such. Yeah, I have used robotic process automation for everything from, skilled nursing facilities and wound care to now, Zymeta is a revenue cycle management company. So we have clients that are hospitals, physician groups of all different specialties. And so I would highly recommend it. I think it's been great. And you can reach out to Sudhir if you need any help. I highly recommend them.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that ends our session. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.